The first time Akshochet Luna noticed the gods leaning into her food truck, Sunrise was still painting the aluminum shutters a shy pink. She had just sprinkled cilantro across a steaming bed of carnitas when the breath of the city seemed to still. A windcall, almost playful, slipped under the awning, curling around the pot like a curious serpent. For heartbeat-long instants, the simmering pork rattled against the pan as though something beneath the bubbling lard were trying to speak. She chalked it up to fatigue. Running La Sabrosa Estrella, her small, bright brew truck, parked on Calle Bolivar, meant 3 a.m. market runs and nights ending only when the last office worker wiped salsa from his lips. But as days passed, oddness accumulated like grease on a griddle. The Al Pastor, shaved in radiant red ribbons, triggered bursts of laughter among customers who swore they felt an inner drumbeat urging them forward. Stimor, foie, a barbacoa, cooked slow in maguey leaves, coaxed tears of nostalgia from tourists who had never tasted it before, as if memories borrowed from buried ancestors had surfaced with each bite. Even the humble nopales and queso fresco tacos left diners staring at their hands, marveling at the pulse in their veins. One slow afternoon, she carried a tray of fillings to the prep table and set them side by side. Al pastor, carmito, pollo con mole, nopale. 5 little mounds arranged like petals of a flower. Sunlight speared the truck's roof end, and in that one slanted beam the chilies and onions shimmered with subtle silhouettes. Feathered helmets, flint knives, coils of obsidian smoke. Impossible, she whispered, yet her heart thrummed, echoing the vision. Still, business blossomed. Food bloggers arrived with ring lights and DSLR cameras. Construction workers lined up at dawn. Decocha felt equal parts pride and unease. Pride because she'd inherited her grandmother's recipes. Unease because each day the flavors tasted a centimeter farther from anything earthly. The unease sharpened when Serafin Jimenez rolled onto the block with his rival truck, Tacos Tenebrosos. He had once mentored Tacos, until disagreements over traditional technique, his euphemism for shortcuts, had split them apart. His rig was matte black, emblazoned with a neon green serpent choking a dagger. "For those who dare," read the tagline. At first, Serafin's presence merely spiced the block with competition. Yet on the evening his new Salsa del Umbral debuted, Zokachit felt it a rancid tremor, like spoiled meat disguised by perfume. Patrons scurried from his window, licking crimson sauce from their palms, their eyes wide, unfocused. That night the first taste plague bloomed. It began in front of the Palacio de Bellas Artes. A teenage boy who devoured 3 of Serafin's tacos doubled over, retching not bile but ribbons of living color, an iridescent substance that shaped itself into a mouth bigger than the boy's torso. The mouth hovered, gnashing, unmoored from flesh yet tethered to the boy by a shimmering strand of saliva. Light, onlookers screamed. Street lights flickered. The mouth sniffed, caught the scent of roasted meat, and flung itself down the avenue in search of satiation, dragging its host in a stumbling sprint. Within hours, dozens of such horrors prowled downtown, each an extrusion of craving. Clawed tongues, fists made of gnashing molars, stomach sacs that crawled like slugs, always attached to their origin bodies by ghostly umbilicals. Police cordoned off intersections, firing tear gas that only seasoned the monster's hunger. By dawn, the government blamed an experimental drug. Goja Till knew better. She'd seen Serafin earlier, eyes gleaming as though he'd swallowed sparks of obsidian. The next day, her regulars avoided all street food, clutching steeled nerves and bottled water. La Sabrosa Estrella lost sales, but Exochittl's anxiety rose for a fiercer reason. What if her own tacos, drawing on forces she didn't comprehend, were partly guilty? That afternoon, as she cleaned, the silvery splashback of the steel counter warped into a face-aged serene, with cheekbones sharp as agave spurs. "Child?" it murmured. "You cook upon an altar." The visage vanished, leaving only her reflection. She closed the shutter, locked up and walked south through alleys smelling of diesel, lilies, and fear. At a shabby botanica beneath crumbling cornices, she found Doña Guadalupe, a curandera her grandmother once consulted. Dried marigolds hung like papery suns from the rafters. The air danced with copal smoke. Locochitl spilled everything. Visions in the steam. The plague of living appetites. Seraphine's sinister salsa. The old woman listened, eyes gleaming like wet seeds. Your feelings call the fragmentary faces of the Tenteotl, Guadalupe said, using the Nahuatl word. Each flavor is a prayer. Al pastor marinated with pineapple and chili summons Huitzilopochtli, the hummingbird warrior. Barbacoa draws Mictlatecutli, lord of the underworld. Nopales, soaked in lime, invite Calciutlicu, goddess of fresh water. Carnitas, slow Remrand, offer themselves to Kitatutek, flayed patron of renewal. Mole, rich with cocoa and spice, beckons Quetzalcoatl. And Seraphine, Bisquatl asked? Tezcatlipoca touched his tongue, god of obsidian smoke, of hunger that devours itself. The curandera's voice quavered. He has brewed a false communion, letting hunger leap free of flesh. Those cravings must be reined back, or city and soul alike will be consumed. Guadalupe laced a jade bead in Esquadl's palm. Channel balance. Forge a taco that unites the 5 powers, then feed it to the plague's firstborn. Harmony will ripple backward through every umbilical. But ingredients? Xochitl sputtered. Supply chains are frozen, markets closed. The gods grow where despair cannot look, the old woman said. Seek them. Outside, sirens howled and helicopters thudded overhead. The Zozaclalo, heart of the ancient empire and the modern republic alike, was quarantined by barricades. Appetites-made monster roved in packs there, glutted on looted vendor carts, roaring with head-splitting howls. Xochitl inhaled, tasting ash in the air, and got to work. First, she drove the truck, blessed by her grandmother's rosary tied to the rearview mirror, south to the floating gardens of Xochimilco. Although authorities had announced closures, the Chinampas farmers still polled their tregineras among canals dappled with jacaranda blossoms. To them, hunger was no novelty. They had stared it down for centuries. Echo bartered smiles and promises for handfuls of cacao nibs kissed by river mist. She roasted them on the truck's camal, letting bitter fumes roll into the morning. In the curling smoke, quetzal feathers seemed to flicker. Next, she braved Mercado de la Maest for Chiluacle Negro chilies, rumored to sprout only under eclipses. The vast hall was half deserted, but scent of produce and sweat persisted. She found a solitary vendor singing lullabies to herself. From under burlap, the woman produced chilies dark as dried blood, demanding only a story in payment. Urchitel told her of Huitzilopochtli's hummingbird heart, and the woman wept, handing over the wrinkled pods. Returning to the truck, Urchitel blended chiluacli with pineapple rind, achiote, and pulque, stirring until color mirrored a dawn of war. For barbacoa, she needed maguey hearts from the high desert. She called her cousin in Hidalgo, who loaded a sack onto a bus that creaked into the city like a stubborn mule. By twilight, the bundle arrived. She seasoned lamb, layered it in leaves, and sunk the pot into coals behind her truck, smoke rising in runic swirls. Carnitas required lard so fresh it nearly sang. Across town, butchers had shut their doors, yet at a small carniceria run by twins who believed in luck rather than fear, she found the perfect cut. She simmered the meat in copper under slow flame, adding orange peel and a whisper of cinnamon. Finally, nopales. Outside Chapultepec Park, soldiers guarded gates against rampaging appetites. Xochitl approached the commander, her ladle rattling at her hip like a ceremonial mace, something in her wide-set eyes, or perhaps the stray strands of steam curling from her jacket caused him to step aside. She sliced fresh paddles from cactus lining the walkway, then hurried back as claws and molar monsters prowled beyond barricades, sniffing roofs for leftovers. All night she cooked. No playlist, no phone distractions. Only percussion of bubbling pots and her own pulse keeping time. With each stirring she murmured names, passed down by grandmothers who had never surrendered language, even when conquest tried to silence it. Huitzilopochtli, lend me courage. Mitlatekutli, hold the line between worlds. Chalchiutleki, let flow what must flow. Chipitokalawal, feather this breath with wisdom. Dawn found her at the wheel, driving toward the Zuccololo. Columns of grey-green smoke curled above the square. Stone eagles perched on neighbouring rooftops were streaked with drool from passing tongue monsters. Her tyres crunched over broken vendor carts and abandoned bicycles. In the centre of the plaza hissed Seraphine's truck like a mechanical dragon. Its windows pulsed an eldritch red. Speakers blared distorted cumbia that stuttered like a skipping record. Around it, dozens of appetite creatures feasted on pilfered food, giant stomached bag things digesting whole crates of tamales, mouth sphinxes masticating aluminum cans, skeletal tongues lapping pools of spilled atoll. Seraphine stood on his roof, silhouetted against smog-Schumann sunlight. His once immaculate chef's coat was stained black. His eyes glowed obsidian. "Nzokitel," he crowed. "I have freed humanity from polite restraint. Isn't it beautiful? Hunger in its purest form." The mouth monster the size of a minibus slithered beside him, eyes replaced by quivering taste buds, breath sharp with fermented salsa. The strand connecting it led back to Seraphine's own navel, throbbing like an umbilical snake. "Tezcatlipoca's mirror shows me all," he said, "but even I crave a last indulgence. Your secret marinade. Offer it, and I may spare you." Zatsue parked opposite, engine idling like a loyal heartbeat. She climbed onto her service counter, framed by chrome domes and coloured salsas. In her hands lay a single tortilla, nixmalized until its surface resembled a pale full moon. She layered the taco in a precise order, a smear of cacao mole, strips of nopales glistening green, carnitas glowing golden, a tuft of barbacoa, fragrant with earth and smoke, a shard of pastor, radiant crimson. Finally, she drizzled 5 salsas in braided strings. The air tightened. Even the monsters paused, taste buds quivering. She spoke not to Seraphine, but to the hungers themselves. "Tamaltai, come home." The largest mouth hissed, exposing rows of enamel like pearlescent daggers, yet the hiss carried confusion, almost yearning. Exodal bit first. A small bite. Human. Imperfect. Heat hit her tongue pineapple lightning. Bitter cacao thunder. Nopales rain. Flavors overlapped without drowning each other, a conversation of elements rather than a contest. She chewed, and within her mind 5 voices chimed, forming a chord. She held the remaining taco out. The monster lurched forward, stretching its saliva umbilical until Seraphine yelped, dragged 1/2 meter across the roof. With trembling mandibles, the creature accepted the offering, jaws folding delicately around the little disc. It chewed. Sound fell from the plaza like shattered glass. The other entities froze. City drones above halted in mid-hover. As the monster swallowed, its massive form began to unstitch, threads of colour reversing into the Bueno man whose original hunger had birthed it. He collapsed, gasping, whole again, eyes brimming with tears that tasted, he later swore, of mole and sunrise. A shockwave rippled outwards. One by one the appetite creatures convulsed, their sinews retracting along psychic cords, returning into bellies, tongues, throats of their host. Each host toppled in relief, cradling his or her abdomen as if awakening from nightmare surgery. The cords evaporated like dew. Seraphine alone resisted. His umbilical pulsed thicker, veins of magma flashing under its skin. He snarled, leaping down with a chef's knife. "You stole my glory!" he spat, advancing. Xochitl held up the jade bead. Emerald light blossomed, revealing a mirror of flawless obsidian floating before Seraphine's face. In it, he saw himself, sweat slick, eyes fevered, lips cracked by salt and ego. Behind the reflection hovered Tezcatlipoca's smoking visage. The god whispered so soft only Seraphine could hear, "Are you not still hungry?" Seraphine raised his knife to shatter the mirror. The blade met smoke that hardened into crystal, mid-swing, snapping metal. His own appetite, uncorked beyond retrieval, reversed course. Plunging inward, he dropped, clawing at his chest as though trying to keep emptiness from flooding him. When at last he lay still, there was no monster beside him, only a hollow humming, like wind through cracked obsidian. Troops stormed the plaza minutes later, too late to witness the miracle's peak. They found dozens of dehydrated civilians, a single unconscious chef in black, and one blue food truck from which drifted aromas of paradise. In the aftermath, doctors scanned brains, measured blood sugar, declared mass hysteria. Officials banned street salsas, pending investigation. Yet those who had tasted Xochitl's final creation spoke in hushed tones of a moment when every desire they ever carried nested peacefully in their ribcage, no longer gnawing but glowing. La Sabrosa Estrella relocated to a quieter street in Coyoacán. Its new chalkboard listed 5 tacos, no more, no less. Lines still formed, though Xochitl served slowly, meeting each customer's eyes, intuiting whether they needed courage, renewal, or a mindful sip of the void. Inside the truck hung a modest altar. A hummingbird feather, a shard of bone, a smooth river stone, a strip of tanned leather, and the jade bead now strung on agave fibre. Sometimes, when the night grew still, steam from the pots twined into silhouettes that nodded approval, then dispersed into the city's restless sky. One Sunday at closing, a wide-eyed girl asked, "Are you a bruja or a chef?" Nashukith wiped a knife, thought of her grandmother singing while kneading massa, thought of gods who tasted the world through mortal tongues, and answered, "I am a bridge, and bridges serve what passes across them." The girl didn't fully understand, but she smiled, wiping salsa from her chin. Somewhere beyond the rooftops, a hummingbird zipped between bougainvillea, hunger briefly indistinguishable from joy.